thanks for coming. You clearly have awesome taste. And yeah. So Sarah and I are from the Tate Gallery, and we sit in a department called Tate Audiences and Media, where we have a responsibility to create digital content for children and young people. So I concentrate on children. The initiative I run is called Tate Kids. I concentrate on children aged 6 to 12. And Tate Kids is a website where I predominantly curate games for kids to get them engaged with art. Tate Audience and Media doesn't sit within our learning team, so it's quite an interesting fit. And so we see what we do as engagement rather than learning. So yeah, so I do 6 to 12s,
and I do 14 to 25-year-olds approximately, but that varies according to the project. It's slightly different from Tate Kids in the sense that with the older age groups, we divide them into sort of 3 different age groups, and then we tend to do project-specific work which targets different age groups between 14 and 25.
So, yeah, sorry, I just talking all over. So we're going to talk about 3 of our projects today. And we're talking about Wondermind, which was an externally funded project that ties art and science together for children aged sort of 8 to 12 using Alice in Wonderland as a hook. Sarah will be talking about
a project called Hello Q, or the Hello Q, which is part of Kusama, Infinite Kusama event project that we did for young people.
And I'll also be talking about a project that we run called Underworld. And I'll start here. Underworld was an experiment in online interactive storytelling. It was a small kind of alternate reality game-esque experience which unfolded via Twitter, where the audience could influence the outcome if they asked the right or enough questions. So I'm like doing this presentation in a bit of a backward way, because before I go into exactly what we did and why, the protagonist of the tale, Elena Batham, have brought her back to life for the presentation. So if you're on Twitter, you can talk to her at Elena Batham, or the writer at Han Chan. They're both online now if you want to speak to them about any of the decisions that we made. And we're also using the hashtag She's Alive at MCN if you want to use that. Hannah was an assistant in our team, but you know, she's now not with us. I mean, she's not dead, but she's just left town. She's gone to a charity, damn her. So, how did Underworld come about? So what led us to making this thing, and what is it? Well, we had a show at Tate called John Martin, which we put down as our central piece of content. So the show, when you work on things, I guess it's the same for all of you, but when you work on things at Tate, the digital aspect comes in way down the line. We're not involved in the curation of the show, whatever. So the show was complete when we started thinking about the story, but we had buy-in from the curator of the show, who was really open to our ideas. Then the plan was to make that show, John Martin, appealing to young people. And the show was part of an initiative that we run in the UK called the Great British Art Debate, or GBAD. So GBAD is a 4-gallery, 4-year partnership with 3 regional galleries and us at Tate Britain. We're working together to explore historic British art collections and explore questions about nationhood and identity, and it's specifically aimed at a young audience, again 16 to 25. Which we're aware is, like, you know, 16-year-olds are very different from 25-year-olds. We know. But next, after we knew we were doing something for GBAD, came a super intense trailer for the show that was made by our film team. It was something, we'd never made a trailer like this for a show internally, and it really made people think differently about what we could achieve with the show. I'll just show it to you. And I don't know if this
say as well that our film team commission in different ways for film content, and they sit within our department. And for this specific one, we tried commissioning like exterior directors a couple of times for a couple of other shows when our old director was still here. But this one was one of the first times we'd done it recently. And basically, we work internally with an external director, and they conceptualise a piece of film like in response to the show. So it can be quite far removed from the show in many senses. So then that piece of creative content comes in, and then we can respond to that again digitally, which is quite an interesting model to work with. It's really, really nice.
Yeah. I'm going to show you the video. I hope you can hear it. So internally, everybody was like, "F yeah, John Martin, we can rock something out here." So what we did, we looked at John Martin himself, whose life was just full of craziness, and there was loads of rich stuff we could weave into a possible story. So if you ever get a chance, have a look at his Wikipedia page. His artworks are full of narrative qualities. They're inspired by the Bible, Greek myths. The paintings themselves are just huge and bombastic. Odd things happened to his work after he died. I mean, one piece was cut into 3 bits and made into a screen in somebody's house, and then someone found it and later restored it and stitched it all back together. He was really interested in improving like London's infrastructure, and came up with a sewer system that predates the system we have now by like 25 years. So he's a real kind of Renaissance dude, and he was really influential in rock music and album art, especially Iron Maiden stuff. Also for us, which we love Ray Harryhausen at Tate, and he's the stop motion legend behind Jason and the Argonauts and Clash of the Titans, and he cites John Martin as an influence in his work. Okay, so this is a random slide. And this is Ted Hughes' house, the poet Ted Hughes, which is now a residential writing course. And Hannah and I had been up there for the first writing for video games course to support the other work that we were doing on Take Kids. So when we were there, we were talking loads about branching narratives and interaction points, and whether a game can be flexible, and how cool it would be if you could create a kind of narrative that you could play through and affect it. And then a group of science fiction fans had self-published an ebook of stories based on John Martin's works. So we thought, okay, this is all coming together. We'll partner up with them, print 100 copies of this book for them, and have a launch party. So they're all the reasons that we were thinking. And also with Twitter, we were thinking, we could see that young people were engaging more and more and more. We wanted to create an experience on an existing platform rather than trying to create a platform from scratch, which I think is something we tend to do in the museum sector. We was, bring people to our website, but it was better for us to just go where the kids were.
We also did some, in terms of audience research, Hannah went to some, she was quite into this sort of stuff, but she went to some, Games Workshop expos and, some real kind of science fiction, specialist science fiction kind of stuff to find out the kind of young people and new audiences that might be interested in the kind of thing that we were thinking about, and to think about the audience in a bit more detail. And I think that she was really good at pushing that internally.
Oh, yeah, and that exactly ties in with my next slide, which was believing your people believe, because Hannah was a really confident writer, and she knew game design inside out, and she self-defined as a massive nerd. And she loves Twitter, so she sat in the Tate social media group, and she said she had 2 spare weeks, which was a bit of a lie, it turned out. So all of those factors, all of the planets aligned to form this thing called Underworld. So we took the narrative that you saw in that trailer and weaved a story of a heroine drawn into the paintings of John Martin, and she had to go through 5 of the works in the order that they appear in the show. So it looked like this. It looks like a Twitter feed. So here's a small selection of the tweets that Elena was making, and she made a total of 428 over I think the 4-week period that the game ran. So if you get a chance to check out the Twitter feed at Elena Batham, go and have a look, because then you can see how the narrative unfolded and how she engages with real people who are engaging with the story. And like I say, she's online. Elena's online now, so feel free to ask her about her experiences in the paintings. We also, this is a screenshot from the Tate blog. We used the Tate blogs and the Tate Twitter account to announce the game and to provide a frequently asked questions and give a weekly roundup of what happened to keep the players old and new up to date. I mean, this is not strictly best practice for an ARG-esque type game, because you normally want players to happen upon the story in the game, but this was just too risky for a project of this kind, and we thought the take-up would be likely to be 0 if we did that. So we really kind of told people what was going on, and we couldn't use the main Tate account to do it, so we had to set up a separate one. And so taking Hannah's time out of the equation, the total cost of this project, excluding the trailer, which was done by another team, was £136, which I think is like, what, $250? And that was the cost of drinks that we provided at a launch event. So
obviously there was Hannah's time.
Yeah,
Which...
taking her time out of consideration. And the 2 weeks that she spent was basically, she was writing and play testing the content. And the game played out over 4 weeks. At its peak, I think we ended up with around 200 followers, which is low, but 25 to 30 of them collaborated, questioned, and led the story forward by interacting with Elena. And we were happy with this figure because, I mean, we didn't know if anybody was going to take it up at all, and it was just something that Hannah really wanted to do, and I wanted to support her with it. So the lessons learned on this one. This was a training wheels experience for us. We found that people couldn't follow her unless we posted regular roundups, because the majority of people don't have the time or inclination to get that deep into a story without them. There were lots and lots and lots of Easter eggs and extra content written into the story, which were never discovered. And it was hard not to be a bit precious about it or try and sway the story, but if we did that, it wouldn't have been an authentic experience. It had to just run the way it had to run. Again, when you do digital projects, it's quite difficult to track whether people would come to see the show after participating with the game. But we felt that we were just happy that they were interacting with a Tate project. It's a tricky one, but we were really happy that some people were getting like way involved, like way involved with her, and she seemed to like make friends. She was making friends, and it was cool. And a lot of the people were from the museums committee, the museums community, people who I've met at Museums of the Web, and they're like, oh yeah, Elena Batham, yeah man. So I think it was more like a game. It was like for us, by us, rather than for the audience.
That's a valid thing as well, in the sense that. A lot of what we do at Tate, I think we try to be quite experimental sometimes, and it's sometimes easier to be more experimental when it's not something that has a huge amount of profile. And you probably know that from things you do internally in your departments or even within your teams. And we've certainly found that, I mean, the bigger projects that I've done that have been elevated massively, which I'll talk about one project which was huge, in terms of the scale and who supported it, maybe internally in terms of across departments, it would have been a lot harder to take risks with the story and to make things happen as quickly, and it wouldn't have been as agile if it had as large a profile, I think. So you kind of need to weigh up whether you want to do something where you think it's really creative and it's taking a few risks and it's going to be something you can use as an example of something really, really interesting. Hopefully it can do both. It can have profile and it can be something as experimental, but I think finding that balance is quite difficult sometimes.
Yeah, it's tricky. You know, I was saying that Hannah had 2 spare weeks. Well, rather selfishly, she went off and got married in the middle of the project, so we had other members of the social media team pick it up, and because the project was her baby, definitely her baby, she was the mother, it was difficult for them to pick it up, but once they did, they got with it. It was just a bit weird, but seriously, the project was quite intense, but it was finite, so you couldn't do it half-assed. You had to do it and do it well for the 4 weeks that it ran, and so scheduling tweets made the process much easier, but of course people had to be around to interact with the people who are interacting with you. So there may not be a next time for us doing something like this, but it was just like serendipitous. We had the artist, the team, and the opportunity, and we just moved quickly to try something new. I would, if I was you, I'd just do it, have a go. So that's the end of this bit. If anybody's got any questions about the process or anything at all, just let me know.
How many hours out of the day was it all the night, or is there sort of...
No, I think we would do it, she would sort of come online between sort of 4 o'clock UK time and stay on till about 6. And the story said that, you know, she couldn't see her mobile phone, or she couldn't she'd only have like a small window every day where she would answer. So we kind of took the logistical issues and wrapped it into the narrative. Is she answering any of your questions at all if you're on Twitter? Because she's actually responding. Oh, good. Are you? Oh, good. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, and we should say as well, okay, it was her time during that process, but before that, she'd spent the time at the course. You guys spent the time at the course writing the game and the narrative. So obviously there was the prep time as well as the time when she actually was alive on Twitter. So yeah, you always have to factor that time in when you plan a project. Generally, if you want to bring something to life on Twitter, it's probably going to be a little bit more demanding than an hour a day. That's my experience of it. The bigger it gets, the more dialogue there is, the more support, and if you want something to be authentic, you need to have the time to make it authentic. I think that'd be my lesson.
What type of outreach did you do to reach your audience?
So we didn't do that much marketing. I think I might have missed a slide because we don't have much budget. So what we did, we used our main Twitter account to tell people that we were starting this. Ooh, follow Elena Batham for a cool game kind of thing. And then we did the blogs and tweeted about the blogs. And
there's the GBAD, also there's the GBAD site as well. So this was part of, there was actually quite a lot of outreach in terms of GBAD's outreach. Great British Art Debate, a key part of its remit is to reach young people, and that's part of how it was funded. So we have massive target numbers for how many young people will reach in terms of Great British Art Debate, and that's I think it's a 4-year project, 4-year funded project. So this was a small, tiny part of what is a massive project that has exhibitions that tour the UK, where we have events. And as part of this, I think this was tied into, we have events called Late at Tate's at Tate Britain, and Late at Tate's tend to be curated in different ways according to what exhibition is on and what exhibition they're tied to and who the audience target is. Connected to this, I think there was a Later Tate which Tate Collective, who are the young people's group that we work with, curated. They curated the event, and they curated an event which was obviously to cater for a younger audience. And things like this would have been tied into how we targeted the event as well.
And we tied it into that. I spoke about the book launch of the ebooks that we paid for, and that we managed to bring a lot of science fiction writers in. So these things are quite tricky because we are aiming for children, but you do get just loads of, well, not children, young people, but so many other strands of people too.
I think one thing with the young people's related content and projects, GBAD's audience is far wider than that. So this project, I think, would have reached a far wider audience in terms of some of the people that might have been tweeting weren't necessarily 16 to 25. But I think what you'll find is if you're engaging, say, a larger percentage of 16 to 25-year-olds, then you're reaching some of your targets. I think this particular project was kind of quite an experimental one, and it was because Hannah really wanted to do it. I think you'll probably see with the project that I talk about that the targets for that and the scale of that and how many young people we had to reach are slightly bigger, and that was tied in with the sponsor who was, this isn't a sponsored project, this is funded as part of a wider scale of funding, and actually we didn't use the external funding to do this project, we did it through our own resources and just through Hannah as well. So yeah, the larger the project, the larger the target, the bigger the beast.
Yeah, the bigger the beast, that's, well, hell yeah. Yeah, yeah. Any other questions on this one?
So for the Apocalypse is Coming trailer,
yeah,
where did the creative direction come from and how much did you pay the production?
Oh.
The creative direction actually came through, we have a film team who are fantastic, and Kate Vogel, who is part of the film team, actually worked at Channel 4 as the commissioning editor for something called 3-Minute Wonders, which is one of where new directors would have a 3-minute slot on main sort of broadcast channel. So she comes from a background whereby
I think she's kind of well versed at working with interesting kind of directors and doing experimental kinds of content, and on quite a sort of, a lot of people are going to see it scale. So I think she was able to probably persuade people internally that it was a good idea to do that. Our budgets are tiny. I don't know how much it costs, to be honest with you, but I would imagine it was pretty small.
Yeah, it wouldn't be more than a couple of grand,
Yeah.
because we just can't do it.
We don't have. And so you're usually twisting people's arms.
Yeah.
It's a high quality production, so it's one of these things where, you know, when I see that, I see it as a production company, a vendor trying to get some exposure,
Yep.
right? Involving yourself with it, but it's not a sustainable kind of model. It's like, you know, you go back to them and they're going to add another 1 or 2 zeros to the budget.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know what, over my years in Tate, you make it a reciprocal relationship. You work with young talent, they do well out of you, you do well out of them, they move on, they charge more money, you lose them.
Yeah,
you move on to the next. And as long as they benefit from it, I'm quite clear with people about, and I don't know if everyone's the same, but I'm quite clear with people when I commission young kind of creatives, and I've worked with quite a lot of young creatives with Tate Collective, that I'm not necessarily able, I'm honest, I'm like, I don't have a lot of budget.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of money. So let's craft out a project together that you're excited about, that you're really interested about, that you want to take out there and you want to share and you want to show as your work. And if you can benefit from it and I can benefit from it, then we'll both be happy at the end of it, hopefully. If we haven't got killed, like, pissed off with each other along the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I just think, I always think it's about being honest. I mean, people in the UK, I guess Tate brand association is powerful. Tate's a powerful brand. People know that, they want to work with you, so we're lucky in that way. We're lucky in that way. If you're a smaller museum or gallery, you don't necessarily have that kind of
clout.
Like, you wouldn't necessarily have that kind of leverage. But I think the same principle applies in the sense that if you give someone an amount of creative freedom and you do a good piece of work, then they can use that work and you can use that work. So I'd stand by that. It's like, if you create a space where people can do something exciting and you're excited about it, then
then you've both
powerful.
won.
And you don't have to be at Tate to do that. Maybe it's a bit easier at Tate for us to get people involved and for us to reply to our emails because we're bigger and people know who we are. But I think, yeah, you've got more freedom maybe, I don't know. So yeah, hopefully you could do that model with, you know, I mean, I work with quite a lot of graduates who are hungry for opportunities, who have the equipment, who have the time, and a lot of the time production houses, they're charging you a whopping rate for their time, more than anything. So, yeah, I believe you can do it. You can do good stuff.
You can
high
do it.
production values. The production values might be slightly different, but if you're creative enough about it and you use that, you maybe create a different set of parameters in terms of production values or something, you can still do it, I think.
Cool.
A quick question about the Pandemonium publication.
Yeah.
So, could you talk a little bit more about how that exactly came about, and also was it only in print or?
So it was something that was happening completely separate. It was a separate thing.
Yeah.
And then Hannah was engaged with that community and was like, "Oh my God, we've got the show. We will pay to print 100 copies, and to bring you down to the show, and we can talk about our game at the same time." So it was just something completely random that we weren't involved in, but then just jumped on the back of, really. But we only printed 100 copies, and they were all out of print. I think they got sold on the night, and it's not available as an ebook either, I'm afraid. But yeah, it was just spotting an opportunity and reeling it in.
Yeah, that's about audience engagement as well. Because a lot of the time that we've found that if we do partnerships with another sort of activity that is engaging our audience and we partner up, then therefore it's a very simple, resourceful way to reach a wider number of people within your audience remit. So looking for those opportunities and developing those relationships is always really good.
Cool. Anything else?
One more question
Yeah.
outside of the trailer. Do you, when you're working with these outside vendors, and do you in your agreement, always make sure that the Tate owns the rights and permissions to the end result?
In all honesty, I think that it varies according to
the project.
All our internal stuff obviously is a little bit simpler. I'm not sure on that one. Could find out for you though.
I mean, otherwise, you know, you're at their mercy of where you can display that and you can't display that.
I think usually in terms of how we can use it, yeah, you're signing your life away when you work with us. Like we can use your content. That's my understanding of that's the stuff that I've put through that department. But yeah, if you want to know more about like that and commissioning content, you should definitely like try ask some questions. Send me an email and I'll put you in touch with the team who develop some of that, because we develop a lot of really good sort of video content, and there's different models for how it's commissioned and how we work with it, I think.
Cool. Okay. My next project. This is an Alice in Wonderland inspired project, Wondermind, that I, along with many other people, internal and external to Tate, developed and launched November 2011. Check it out if you haven't seen it. It's in Flash, so it won't work on your iDevices. I'm really sorry, but if you get to a computer, you'll be able to see it. Wondermind has the aim of reaching audiences not normally engaged with biomedical science by delivering a highly interactive website for children aged 8 to 12 and their parents, carers and teachers. It introduces them to key neuroscience concepts and child development inspired by the works from the Tate collection and an exploration of the world as presented by Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. So Wondermind has 3 content areas. It has 4 mini-games which use Alice in Wonderland themes to introduce our areas of scientific focus in a friendly and engaging way. A series of interactive videos which are linked to the game but delve deeper into the science and have interviews with scientists and researchers. And then the website itself, the interactive content sits within a WordPress-powered blog which allows kids to find out even more about the science and the art related to the concepts and share their thoughts in the comments. So I'll just show you what it looks like. There might be a sound issue again, but we'll try. So you might be thinking, well, that's all cool and all, but why? Why Tate? So it was like a few planets aligned. Tate and I were really keen to work on like a multidisciplinary project that would tie art and science together. I just thought it'd be something really interesting to do that would hopefully underform understanding and appreciation of both worlds. The Wellcome Trust, who are big funders of science outreach projects in the UK, had just put out a call for ideas centred around grey matters that was relating to the brain. We were having an Alice in Wonderland show at Tate Liverpool and began to think about some ideas for games and interactives around the exhibition. And personally, I wanted a fresh challenge, an opportunity to work on something quite ambitious. Again, not to be crying and playing the world's smallest violin about our budgets, but they're quite small, and I wanted to try and achieve something a bit bigger. So who were involved? I mean, it was a huge team effort. The games were designed by a company called Preloaded, who are a game studio in London. The interactive content by a filmmaker called Martin Percy, and the science content was led by Dr. Michelle Dehan, who is from university in London, and we applied for the funding as a unit. And internally to Tate, there were many teams involved. Us in audiences and media, I got learning involved, IS, information services, or our IT department, marketing, press, curatorial, AV, because the game was online, but also in Tate Liverpool on 4 kind of kiosks for the duration of the show. So back to the project itself, I'm a keen advocate of learning by doing, and we were keen that the kids would play through the science rather than the science be explained with text. So the games would be the hook into the content, and then the kids would be pulled into the active video and down deeper into the blog. So it's like they would literally fall down a rabbit hole with us into learning more about science and art. So this kind of presentation is centred around what the game design principles I employed. So the ambition was to create moorish and compelling gameplay, and using a core game mechanic or a verb that's really simple to understand and fun to use, with a clearly defined objective or target to give the players some focus. We wanted to create tension between success and failure, and jeopardy was like the metronome of the experience. And we needed measures of achievement, so you'd want to come back and play it again and again and again. It's like the carrot of the experience. And there were more other things we wanted to include. So it had to be related to Alice in Wonderland. It had to be informed by the science, and because it was coming from Tate, it had to look good and be of a high aesthetic standard. So the Wondermind 4, that's what I called my 4 games. Let's have a look at them. Plasticity is the first concept that we tackled. There's got a big fat quote coming up here, but in a nutshell, it means that the small parts that make up your brain, your neurons, are more connected in children's brains than adult brains. And these connections change depending on how much you use them. So we came up with a game called Pathways. And the aim is to direct Alice through an ever-changing forest as she chases after the white rabbit. She's given a limited amount of time to catch up with him each time he appears. If she reaches him before the clock runs out, then any unused time is added to the next mission. So it allows for infinite play, and the aim here is to play the game for as long as possible. She can only move along forest pathways that are kept clear, and paths can only be kept clear by regular use, or by use of this eat me item, which makes her larger, and she just stomps down the path, clearing it quickly. And so if the path is not used for a certain amount of time, then it becomes overgrown, preventing Alice from using it. So the winning strategy is to try to vary the paths Alice uses rather than taking the most direct route to the rabbit. This way the paths can be kept open and she'll be able to catch up with the rabbit. So the rabbit appears in random locations throughout the game, so every time you play it, it's a different experience. And at the end of the game, we provide a little summary to show the players that they were playing through a scientific concept. And in this case, this one was, the forest had lots of pathways which changed depending on which ones you use the most. Did you know that's what your brain does every day? Spatial Cognition, this is our second game. So again, another big quote, but basically, children make mental maps of their positions in the world. It takes longer for a person to learn to imagine what the world would look like from a different point of view. So again, we came up with, the approach to this concept is on reflection. And the player is presented with the screen displaying a moonlight garden maze. At the bottom is Alice with her lantern, and deep within the maze we can see the Cheshire Cat laughing away in the moonlight. And the idea is to get Alice to shine a light on the elusive Cheshire Cat who's hiding deep within the maze. And the player does this by taking a number of right-angled mirrors and placing them in strategic positions around the garden. And once the mirror is in position, the player will click on Alice and she'll shine them into the maze. If the mirrors are set up correctly, then the light will be reflected around the maze and be beamed on the Cheshire Cat. The quicker it's done, the more you'll score. The winning strategy is to quickly and decisively place the mirrors before the time runs out. And again, every time you play it, it's randomised, so you can keep coming back. And the end of game summary text here was, this game is about moving around spaces. Understanding spaces and how to move around them is a big part of what your brain learns to do as you grow up. So every time you play the game, once you've finished, you get that little bit of context that tells you that, yeah, you've been learning something. Memory. Different parts of the brain remember different kinds of information for different amounts of time, basically. So Remember Me was our game. It's a simple matching pairs game here. The aim was to help the Queen find her volunteers from within the card deck. She's impatient, so speed was of the essence. If the clock runs out, then your game is over. You can add time to the clock by picking out other cards. The more cards you turn over, the more you can manage to look at within a time limit, the better. You don't lose any lives, etc., etc., etc. So the winning strategy was to quickly identify the pairs. And there was a time element here, so you could try and beat your time. And the science bit at the end of this one was, to play the game, you used your memory, but did you know that you don't have only one, you have two types of memory, which you both use every day. And the final game was language. And big quote again, but basically your brains become quicker and better at telling apart sounds and words of language as you grew up with. Does that make any sense? Over time, your brains become quicker and better at telling apart sounds and words of the language you grew up with. Yeah, it does. Barely. So Talking Tea, this was the game we came up with. It's a pipes game. You had to deliver tea to the Mad Hatter is delivering tea to cups of guests at the party. You have to adjust the pipes between the pot and the cups. The strategy is to quickly rearrange the pipes as quickly as you can. Speed and strategic thinking are imperative. And the science bit at the end of this one was, in this game you serve the right tea to the party guests by turning off the pipes you didn't need. This is just like focusing on learning one particular language. Did you know that's what your brain did as a baby? Okay, now I'll get into some more interesting stuff. So they were the 4 games. We got them into the world by not only having them within the full experience on the website with the interactive videos in the blog, but we also had a standalone version of the games that were designed specifically to be syndicated to games portals and third-party sites with the view of driving people back to enter.wondermind.com. So Wondermind's been live for just over a year now, 1 year and like 4 days, and it's gone down quite well, and we've had some success with it. We've had around 300,000 plays, 250,000 unique players, which is pretty good, but we told the funder we'd get 800,000, so it was a bit like, ooh, okay, tricky. We had some really nice comments left for us on games portals, and this one, I thought someone had planted this, but they didn't. They said, amazing game. I don't think you understand how much I love Alice in Wonderland, and this takes it to a whole new level. I went to the website as well. I'm learning a bunch of interesting things about how the brain works. Interesting information with an ingenious hook. 5 out of 5. So I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to achieve with the experience. So I was pleased that someone actually thought that. We had some good coverage in the gaming press and in gaming blogs, like Develop, Gama Sutra, Jay is Games, which was good for Tate and putting us into a completely different audience. We were nominated for a few awards with this, some Webbies, we got some Lovies, we got an honourable mention at Museums in the Web last year, which was wicked. But I guess the most important part now is that what we've learnt from it and what we've taken from it, and what things you can think about when you're going to do a multidisciplinary project with funders like this. So I would say, assemble a team of experts in all the content areas. Don't try and like bullshit your way through the content, because you'll end up doing a disservice to everybody. So if you're going to do something with science, make sure you do get scientists involved, and don't think you can just wing it, because you can't. Keep the core team to a minimum, but brief wider groups within your institution as early as possible and keep them in the loop, because you will need their help, and it's rude to just spring a massive project on someone late in the day. Random.
Which is what usually happens to us.
Yeah.
The other way around.
Show your funders the work as you progress. Don't let them wait until launch to see it. Don't wait until launch to let them see it, because they will request expensive changes once it's live, which they did to us. And also with funders, like I said, don't set yourself a crazy target to reach. Because although the target we set was, we based it on other games that Preloaded had made for the Wellcome Trust, and we cut it in half. So yeah, just go shoot low. If you're having an online physical component, it sounds really obvious, but go to the site a lot. I'm based at Tate Britain, which is in London. The show is at Tate Liverpool. It's I don't know how many miles it is. 100 and I don't know. I'm going to embarrass myself.
2.5 hours.
But it's far, so you need to go there a lot. And I just left my kiosk up there, and they went down for a week, and nobody told me. So yeah, check on your tech. Be prepared to compromise a lot. No matter the amount of funding you get, it's never enough. So think big, but be prepared to scale back. I think I got £187,000 to do this. So I don't know how much that is in US dollars. 250?
Yeah, about to.
Yeah, 1,000. So it was a big deal for us.
Yeah, big project for Tate.
Mm.
But with any funder, I think even the bigger funders, what they want for their money, they always want bang for their buck.
Mm.
So, you know, you're stretching £138, you're stretching £150,000 to its limits. It's about managing it in different ways as well, isn't it?
And just one point on the games. Ask yourself actually whether a game is the best way to answer the question is the best way to answer your question and convey the information. For Wondermind it really was, but I am quite a fan of what I'm calling digital toys, which are more open, interactive play for experiences, and that they might be a better way to communicate what you're trying to communicate. And also put some money aside for marketing, because even if your brand is strong, you can't wing it.
Yeah, I think deciding what you want to do, this is an interesting one, deciding, I want to make a game. And then choosing, like, the exhibition, or... Do you know what I mean? If you've already got it in your head what you want, but you're not looking at what the content is, or thinking kind of outside the box first, often the way that we work is that, for instance, the project I'm going to talk about, we had an idea of what we wanted to do, and that shifted when we got the creative teams involved, because the scope broadened. So don't decide you want to do something before you've got a group of really interesting people involved, and you can scope it out more, and then that'll stretch the limits and parameters of what you're going to do. So like you're saying, don't necessarily assume a game is what you need or what you want.
Okay, I'm done with that. Has anybody got any questions?
Yeah, I was just curious, did you do any evaluation?
Yeah, so because it was externally funded, we spent, I think, like 10% of our budget on evaluation. I wasn't that pleased with the evaluation process personally, because I think they did a survey, and they went and did some school visits and at-home visits. And there were some things came back that I can't action. They want some more content on the blog. They really like the games. Maybe they like the games a bit too much, and they weren't going through to the rest of the experience. But the trouble is with making these changes is that this project launched like a year ago, and I'm kind of tired of it. So it's like, I don't know if I can't spend any more time on it as much as I would love to. And the funders want us to keep promoting it, which I will do, but it can't go in every communication that we send, because it's just, the show has gone and its moments past. But there are certainly things that I could do to keep it going and make it make more sense.
A follow-up question to that too would be, was it more important for the gaming concept to get kids to think in certain ways, or was it to drive them to conclusions about neuroscience concepts?
No. For me, what I wanted was the kids to play a game and then realise that they were doing something scientific. I really, like, I've come from an e-learning background where we used to, you have things where it's like, oh, in this module you will learn X, Y, Z. And I just find that the most depressing thing ever. Yeah, so I just thought, play a game, and then at the end of that game, have a bit of content that says, you know what, you've played a game, but actually this is what your brain does. And I thought that might be the hook to take them deeper into the content. I think it kind of worked, but yeah, I found that the kids just play the games, and some of them go to the video. It does, like, the numbers slim down massively. Hi.
You mentioned the funders asked for changes. Are those changes that...
I'm sorry?
The funder asked for changes?
Yeah.
Is it based on the evaluation?
No, but so what happened was, okay, internal politics. So we have a team that manages the funders, and it's a good process because they say, you concentrate on the content you're trying to make, and we'll deal with all the admin. But the tricky thing is that the funding process was long, but the development time was short because the show, we got told that we had officially got the money in sort of August, and then we had to deliver it by November. So things were just happening really quickly, and a lesson learnt was that we weren't sharing enough, or didn't we feel that we had to share the stage of development with the Wellcome Trust. But then, yeah, it launched, and they were like, oh, we got a couple of things. They were small things, but at the time they felt just so huge because you spent so much time working on this thing. So they wanted some things renamed. They were like, oh, we want some more science up front. And I was like, but this is the exact thing that we said we weren't going to do. But we all calmed down, and it was great. We just changed a few like game titles and things, and it was fine.
And even if you share with a sponsor or a funder through the development process, they just ask for changes then too. So like, I don't know where to spur off.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky.
You know, by the time you launch, you're either really tired of the sponsor or the funder, or you launch and then 3 months later you're really tired of the sponsor or the funder. I don't know. Yeah, you will basically have to make changes according to their, and they change their minds, but because they're paying for it, they can change their minds.
Yeah, of course.
A little bit.
Yeah.
So, it's okay.
And I was just wondering how you marketed it.
My what? Sorry. So I didn't set aside any marketing budget, so which sucked. So I had some little postcards that I made up, which I forgot to bring today, but they went in the galleries. I sent out an e-communication, like an e-newsletter we call it, to everybody on the Tate family's list to say that we got it. I also contacted every school in the UK through email to say that I've done this thing, but that didn't work really well. Got loads of bounce backs, and I checked the thing, and like 5% of the people opened the email. I think the best marketing we had was through the games press, funnily enough, and we got like really interesting new people saying, oh, Tate doing some games, that's kind of cool.
It's funny with marketing, because one of the things that I found with marketing, we do really amazing marketing at Tate, fundamentally. What we're really good at is marketing exhibitions, because that's what we do. We're a gallery. So when you get, and events related to exhibitions, and those events can be in different ways, but for things that are around audiences, I often find that, like, for instance, you saying about like only 5% of the people opening, like necessarily opening some e-communications that come through to those for audience specific things. I found that externally it's easier to get an external agency to come and talk to our marketing department about how they should work around audiences, in a way that they're open to get them to think differently about it, because I found that's quite challenging sometimes. And one of the things with Tate is that we're huge, and people who join our email lists get bombarded with Tate bombards me. I work there. I don't know. I mean, I would start to just switch off from it, because we were telling you about exhibitions at every single gallery, we're telling you about this, and then we start telling you about game, and it's kind of like, I think that's kind of also a bit of the question that you want to ask when it's audience specific, is like, what are interesting ways to reach audiences? And when you're talking about a game specific audience, I think that's the success of it. When we do things like that, we do think about some very specific audiences and how we reach them, and that might be how we measure our success. Our marketing department might measure their success in a different way and have different measures of success. So I think that's really important when you start out a project. Be clear with yourself and with the team about how you measure success. For us, it's often about levels of engagement, types of engagement, and the experience the young person or the child has. It's not necessarily about figures, like huge numbers of people engaging with it. If we have smaller numbers but they've engaged on a deeper level, that's what we're trying to do a lot of the time. But tell that to perhaps other people internally, that's not what their measure of success is. So it's interesting, isn't it?
So you mentioned aesthetics and being in an art institution and having to create a game with that. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges and how you met those?
Okay, so what it was, I picked a really good agency to work with who understood that was important and got that innately. So I didn't actually have to do much coaching or hand-holding with the agency, because sometimes it's funny when you work with external companies, they give you a brief and it's for a gallery, and you're just like, really? Yeah, I don't think so. But what I did, I picked the best agency to work with through they've got they're a really high caliber agency, and they work with Channel 4 and the BBC, and they make really good games. So I guess I'm saying, like, just find the best
Did you have to respond? Like, did they have to respond to something that was in the exhibition? Did they have to visually have some relation?
No. We did look at taking some of the working exhibition and actually using it to be the fabric of the games. When we tried it, it looked rough, and we thought, you know what, respect the artwork and put the artwork in the blog below, and then let the games have their own. Yeah, have the games have the look and feel.
It is challenging. It's really challenging. I mean, because we have sort of really, people get very upset about the way things look.
But they also get very upset if you. For instance, the project I'm going to talk about, I had to speak to Kusama herself and Kusama's studio about the aesthetic of the project. So if you get into that realm, there's a whole new world of excitement out there about permissioning. Yeah. So I think doing something that has its own aesthetic has, again, like different interesting points, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a good way out.
So being clear about how you're measuring success is important, but does your institution consider the project to be a success, and are you going to be able to leverage it to do future projects like this, kind of on this scale and with this kind of budget?
Yeah, I think it has been seen as a success, because I spent a lot of not project money but my other budget money on entering it into awards. And it's I think because it's from Tate, when it goes to these award bodies, people are like, oh, that's kind of cool. So I've been nominated for like a whole raft of things this year for it. And I think, I put it in. We got this weekly media bulletin as it goes in, like every week. Oh, we've got this nomination, we've got this, we won this. So I think from the critical acclaim of it, I think I'll be able to leverage that. With the numbers being much less than what we suggested, I don't think Tate are that upset about that. And even when we spoke to I had a meeting with the funder last week before I came, and she was like, I'm not stressed about the figures being less than what you suggested, because I've seen that there's been some like deeper engagement. So yeah, I think the lesson learned is to put put your figures much lower. Don't go up. Just don't set yourself a crazy high target.
But in terms of like internally selling things, like getting buy-in from the institution, I think we come up against it quite a lot, don't we? Doing digital stuff, I think. I think if you do good work, people appreciate it, and they always will. And then there'll be some people who just don't understand it.
But it's also the way you go about the project internally as well, and the way you communicate it to the other departments, and just being respectful about what you're going to do. Because if you're going to involve loads of people, you can't just spring, oh yeah, I've got this bloody huge website, man. It's coming in like 2 days. Like, you ready? You know, it's just not going to work. So just tell them from the outset, and like just be respectful to everyone, and hopefully, if you give them a good working experience, then they'll support you the next time a funding call comes around.
Yeah.
Has anyone got any other questions? Cool. So we'll swap. Do you want to swap computers?
Okay, so we introduced it, didn't we? I look after Tate Collectives, which is the digital strand of what we do for young people. Quite a wide audience remit in terms of 14 to approximately 25-year-olds. I'd say that whole 14 to 25-year-old thing is a little bit loose, and it varies according to different projects. And, you know, sometimes things that we're targeting, say, 18 to 23-year-olds, we might get a load of 27-year-olds coming along or getting involved. So, yeah, I don't get too tied up in. I think it's different if you're doing kind of like big events-based or workshop-based work where your funder or your remit is very, very specific. Then you have to get that target audience along. For digital, it's slightly different. Okay, so this is a project called the Hello Cube, and it actually in response to the Yayoi Kusama exhibition that was coming up at Tate Modern. We realised that the Kusama exhibition was probably going to be a big kind of pull for that audience, so we thought it'd be really interesting to do something a little bit more exciting digitally for that audience. And one of the reasons that opportunity came about was because Louis Vuitton were the sponsor for the exhibition. And Louis Vuitton, believe it or not, have something called the Louis Vuitton Young Arts Project. And they also have a property called recreative.com, which is what they're doing in the UK as part of Louis Vuitton Young Arts Project to reach young people. It's actually a really nice site. And yeah, they basically wanted to promote that. So they came to me and said, we've got some money, but basically, in a roundabout way, you've just got to drive loads of traffic to my website. And so that was essentially the premise. It wasn't quite put like that. But I was like, okay, well, at that point, what I'd done for Tate Collectives was essentially a website-based focused project where there's a community aspect to it, where young people can upload their work, share their work, comment on work. And then I'd done capsule projects with different kind of partner websites. I'd done in-gallery stuff. I'd done some multimedia and sort of rich media content focused projects. But I hadn't done anything with social media, and I was a little bit hesitant, predominantly because I knew I'd be the one that was looking after it all the time. So as soon as I got a Facebook page, as soon as I've got a Twitter account, as soon as I've got all that, we've got so much of that at Tate, and as soon as I start doing audience-specific stuff like that, I need to know that I can resource it, I can develop it, and that it's done well. So I'm the only one that's looking after it, so I need to think quite carefully about how that's managed. And I also wanted to do something really interesting if I was going to do social media. Like, I didn't want to just have another account that markets what we do, and I wanted young people to be central to it and to be really, really core to how it worked. So we had this money, we had this opportunity. So at the moment, what we've got is the main site, off the back of this project, the Twitter account, and then we've also, in the summer, as the tanks opened, we started a Tumblr account as well, which you can have a look at if you're interested. Here's images of those. So this project was specifically, like I said, about around the Kusama, and we called the project Infinite Kusama, and the Hello Cube was actually a digital interactive installation and a crazy cube that existed on Twitter for about 6 weeks and was installed for 3 days. I'm going to look in this presentation about the sort of 3 principles of how I wanted to work around this project. I really wanted to create a really collaborative process, get some creative people in to work differently with digital and with the audience. That was one of the key things that I wanted to do. I wanted to think about how we could integrate social media in new and interesting ways. We've done lots of different really interesting things with social media. For this audience, I don't think we'd experimented with it that much, so that was kind of a key part of it. I wanted to create new interactions and experiences across different platforms and in gallery. We do digital in gallery at Tate, but there's often nothing that's audience specific in that way, so that was quite a new area. So the first part of the process was really to get the stakeholders together and internally a team together and look at the brief, and then we could get more creative people to respond to the brief, and then the project would begin to take shape. So there was 3 points within the brief that were really, really, really important. 1, the project needed to engage young people, 16 to 25, with the Yayoi Kusama exhibition through an exciting cross-platform idea. One of the key things we were looking for when we put this brief out was that the artwork and Kusama's work would remain central to everything. The aim was for the artist and the work to be at the starting point and remain central throughout. We wanted young people to take a journey through different touch points, allowing them to respond creatively at each point in different ways. Wanted the interaction to be a creative one if we were using social media, not just purely I think we could have been using Twitter in a very sort of marketing premise-based way, but I wanted it to be slightly different from that. Create an innovative digital interaction integrating social media. That was a key part of what the brief was. I wanted to experiment with Tate Collectives in terms of how we could approach social media. The project was about trying to find more interesting ways we could use social media by focusing on creative exchange and interaction for that audience. Create a user experience that connects online activities, social media, and in-gallery events en route through stakeholder destinations. The key reason, as I was saying before, that Louis Vuitton agreed to fund this digital project was to promote their IP, Recreative. So a key part of my role was to try to meet those requirements while still creating a project where the audience and the idea was central to the experience. Okay, so the team, young people were a key part of the team. We have at each of the galleries a group of young people called Tate Collective. In London, they work across Tate Britain and Tate Modern. They're amazing. They're a rolling group. Overall, I think the London one now has about 340 young people who've been involved over the years, or more even. And regularly, I'd say there's probably a core group of about 25 to 30 young people. Some of them are graduates, some of them are still in college. There's a lot of outreach work that's been done to involve different young people from different areas of London. They're great. Having them involved is really, really, really important. We got digital agencies to pitch, but we also got digital artists to pitch. Helakar and Lewis are actually, they do sort of interaction-based work, but interaction-based work that uses social media in interesting ways. The idea that they pitched was one of the key reasons we decided to go with them was that they really, really, in their pitch, really did an amazing kind of sort of digital investigation into Kusama's work. They understood her process, they understood, and it related to their process really, really well. And the other digital agencies that came in pitched a digital campaign for young people, and it was it had a totally different feeling about it. And the fact that they make work in that way, and then they understood the artist and their process in that way, and that they were willing to work with the young people in a collaborative way to develop the overall experience, what we were going to do, was key. The other agencies didn't mention working with young people or their audience in any way at all. So they were two of the reasons why we went with Caroll and Lewis. Internal team and stakeholders, I worked with Tate Learning, and in the end worked with IS, IT, SPE, lighting is part of SPE. SPE were like the central team. They're this team that basically look after the building, and they were so important. IT and IS were really important as well. Installation team, AV, and then I also had Caroll and Lewis represented by an external production company called Nexus Interactive Arts, so they were also involved. Then I had external suppliers who supplied UV lights and a massively expensive projector that I got for free, which turned into a bit of a nightmare, but that's another story. External stakeholders, Louis Vuitton. Louis Vuitton wanted to be very, very involved with the project at every step of the way. I have never been to that many meetings to discuss Twitter interactions in my life. It was worth it in the end, but it was just very, very time intensive. That's what I'd say. Like, yeah, they were quite incredible. The Recreative team are another team. They're an offset team that work with galleries across London. They're really great. They're managed by Louis Vuitton, which is kind of a strange setup. So that was another element. So yeah, the external stakeholder thing. And then there was also this woman who ran a PR agency who represented Louis Vuitton. So she came too. Yeah, so there was a huge external stakeholder team on this one. But it was good. I'm going to show a video that was created which shows the beginning of the process. I've got quite a few videos, partially because other people were paying for them, so there was loads of videos that were made. And this was made by the Recreative team for their website, but it's a lovely video of the overall process of how young people were actually involved. That's it.
You can have any approach and any background. There's no such thing as the right way of approaching things or the wrong way.
I got really into skateboarding. It was the first time I ever found something that I really wanted to do. Filmmaking, graphic design, printmaking, how to make skateboards, t-shirts, clothing.
DIY, make your own tools. This is a thing that's really important to both of us. This was a set that I designed for Massive Attack. We got into this idea of feedback loops, and that's the kind of thing that we're really interested in, is making these feedback loops, right, that just make something go powerful and powerful and bigger and bigger and bigger. And we really want you guys to think about this idea. So this is our first day in the office, but we like to make systems that let people make their own stories rather than telling stories directly, putting people in the moment. If we can make technology or projects that make people stop in their tracks and make them stop thinking about their past or their future and get them into now, that's a really powerful thing. They're not thinking if they're looking good, they're in the now. We just came up with the idea, wouldn't it be amazing if there was a projection that you could control from the street and you could do it via Twitter? And we didn't know how to do it when we pitched it. We had no idea. We are Caroll and Lewis, and we've got an amazing idea for an installation for you today. The reason that we use paper prototyping is because it lets you think about ideas without having to have any money whatsoever or any knowledge. And Pete and I, we haven't got any money or any knowledge. Green triangles. I'm going to tweet it now. Yay! Did you do it? Blue square. This is your brief. It's called Smile. It's a computer technology that allows you to text smiles. And you've only got 1 minute to present the idea.
When you smile, the light goes faster.
That's a really good idea. I like that. When you smile.
Like the angle of the smile would like open it more or less. Smile, you get the toilet light open to you. You're like that.
Before you start to smile, money starts raining down.
walk around, people smile at you.
A really good idea to have something to do with dance and something being sociable in the club. A really good demonstration, right? You really communicated the idea straight away. So what we decided was like an upgrade from the Hello Wall. Let's make the Hello Cube that actually responds back to you with a twit pic, like a screen grab or an image of what you've done. We're going to put it in the turbine. What should the cube do? Because we don't know, and we need your help to decide it. We've got to come up with an idea. If we don't come up with an idea, we're in big trouble. We want you to think about Yayoi Kusama's patterns, repeated elements, those shapes. We want you to think about how they're going to react to sound. You can change it via Twitter as well. So what kind of things that you wanted to do? What other commands could you think of saying to the Hello Cube and how should it react? You guys can write the vocabulary of this installation.
We came up with ideas about how we can make a box, a cube in a museum for art exhibition, and we gave them our ideas, and if they're good then they'll go and show.
Someone else is tweeting something. So whenever someone tweets something new, it goes through in a different way.
It was really interesting how like you can make a program but like with social media, like connecting it to a Twitter account. It was really cool.
Talk to them, have a conversation with them. Yeah.
What if the wind hits it?
We use our sense of creativity.
You can't really hear it, can you? Sorry, I didn't actually.
Bring up our own ideas. We contributed in many areas.
Yeah. Basically, I'll explain the video. I was assuming that some of you could hear it, but I don't think many of you can. Yeah, the video basically just shows a development process which Hellicar and Lewis had with. Oh, can you go and see if we can get the sound sorted out? 'Cause videos are quite important. Yeah, the process that they had was to get young people involved with how we would develop the Twitter interactions and how we would bring that into the space. So it was really, really nice how they worked with the young people. They really opened up the brief to the young people that were part of their workshop and got them really kind of deeply involved with the concept of how you could affect the Twitter interaction in the Turbine Hall and then Tate Modern. So they took what was generated during the workshop, and they actually looked at how that could affect the Twitter interaction, and it was really interesting to see how working with young people could become part of a development process in that way. Hellicar and Lewis really looked very deeply into Yayoi Kusama's work. It was really, really, really key part of how the whole work developed. That was one thing that was really wonderful about their process. It also related really well when they pitched their idea. Related really well to their practice and some of the works that they'd been involved in doing before. You probably couldn't hear, but they developed something called the Hello Wall for a commission from the Arts Council. I think it was an architectural commission before that, which was actually kind of almost like a sort of prototype beta version of what we then did in the Turbine Hall. So when we selected them, I felt very, very confident that they would be able to pull it off. And that was quite important, I think, particularly because I felt the pressure of having quite a big sponsor involved. If it was just me doing the project and it was on a smaller scale, I'm often not so worried about if maybe there's going to be a little bit of a bumpy road, but I knew Louis Vuitton were going to be quite difficult they'd want really good results, and so I went with someone that I felt I was assured that the process would work and that they would come up with the goods in the end as well. The actual software, Hellicar and Lewis are really interesting. They always work with open source, so that was really important, and that was also something that for us was really important. For Tate, I think what we do with young people, that's really important. That young people can access the code. So off the back of that project, you can go to GitHub and anyone can work with the code that we've developed. Obviously, they need the skills to do that, but the fact that that's part of the process and that's always the way that Hellicar and Lewis work, that was really appealing, I think, to us in terms of their philosophy and working with them. That's another video, which is a real shame. I don't know whether it's worth showing you the video. It actually shows the installation of the Hello Cube in the turbine hall. And I'll show you it just from a visual perspective. The beginning of it is quite interesting in the sense that you might not be able to hear it, but you can see parts of the cube and what they actually look like in the space. So if you just look at it from that perspective, that's quite interesting. This is the day that it was installed.
Hello, I'm Joel Geffen-Lewis. And I'm Pete Ellicar, and together we are Ellicar and Lewis. And here we are today in the turbine hall with the world premiere of the Hello Cube.
It's actually a partnership between Tate and Louis Vuitton Young Arts Project and Recreative, which is part of Louis Vuitton Young Arts Project. Basically, we started to talk about how we could bring that partnership and we could bring digital into the gallery space together.
I think that's the thing that we always try to do, is we try to use technology in a lot of our projects, but we try to do it in a way that's magical. Rather than screaming that it's a technology demo, it just so happens that one day the Hello Cube turned up in the middle of the turbine.
So I should explain that the Hello Cube was actually in the turbine hall for only 3 days, because that was the window of time that I managed to get the space and get people to agree to give me the space between the Damien Hirst opening and a deinstall of the previous installation. So that's something else to really think about, is that part of the negotiations internally to do a digital installation piece of work was really about, one of the reasons I actually got permission to do this, I think, was because Louis Vuitton sponsored the Kasama exhibition. So they had put a lot of money into Tate to make an exhibition happen, and then they wanted this to happen. So part of the reason I was able to get the space in the turbine hall, I think, was because I had this sponsor involved. Otherwise, I think it would have been quite hard for me to negotiate an audience-specific digital interaction piece in that space. I think that made that a lot easier, and now it's happened, it's a lot easier. But I think that was a big, for me personally, and within the way that our institution works, that was quite an important move. I think really kind of the fact that we then, basically the first day it was installed, we had like a Louis Vuitton kind of opening, the sponsors came down, the director of Louis Vuitton came down, but then the day after that we did a very focused young people's event, which I'll go on to talk about. But basically the Hello Cube had actually existed on Twitter for a month in the lead up to it being installed in the piece, and that was about like warming people up to the idea that there would be this cube that you could interact with and you could control the visuals within the turbine hall, and it would send you an image back of your particular kind of creation. And basically we'd kind of been warming people up to that idea on Twitter for about a month. That was one of the challenging parts of the project for me, was that I was the Hello Cube on Twitter, because that was where the budget was really stretched. Even though I did have sponsorship from Louis Vuitton, I'd just like to add that they didn't give me very much money to do something quite ambitious. I wanted to do something ambitious for very little money, so like, you know, I wanted to do something that had some kind of volume to it. So yeah, I put myself in the situation of being a Japanese cube on Twitter for a month. That was kind of fun. It was actually kind of cool because it made me learn a lot about Twitter interactions and how not to be an inanimate object on Twitter, how to be an inanimate object on Twitter. Like, I spent loads of time researching like all these weird inanimate objects on Twitter. Like there's the toaster. Have you ever seen? Yeah, the toaster on Twitter. Go see it. Yeah, like that was funny, but it was really labour intensive. So when I was planning a major installation in the turbine hall, I was panicking about not responding to random questions that were being sent to me on Twitter, but that was fun. Basically, how you could then respond to it when it was in the space, we published this on the main site. This was also available on Twitter. It was available across the other platforms that were involved, like Recreative and Louis Vuitton. So basically the idea was that you could interact with a cube and send it a command. Those commands were based on the workshops that we'd done with the young people in response to Yaya Kusama's work. So you could say, you'd send it a scene, so you could do spots as part of the scene. I also know actions, so slower, faster, bigger, smaller. You can choose another colour, try tweeting me a colour, so you could do spots, faster, pink, say. You would send that command to the Hello Cube. At Hello Cube, yeah, cells bigger, red. And then you would get sent back your image that would be projected in the turbine hall. So there was usually like between a 1 to 3 minute shift between when you tweeted and when it changed, because so many people were tweeting the interaction. But then you would get sent a twit pip back of how the installation was in the turbine hall. So that was what was quite amazing about it, was that you could interact with something anywhere via Twitter in real time in the turbine hall. And as part of the tweet that you received back from, I should remember this is key to how I actually persuaded Louis Vuitton to let me do it, was that you got, as part of the tweet, you got sent a link to their website. And like 1 in every 12 links, you got a link to my website. But you know, that was part of the deal. It was really funny when the installation actually went into the space, because there's these holes in the side of the cube. People weren't supposed to stick their hands in the holes, but they did. And this bunch of French students came up and stuck lighters in it, and then they had their phones in it. So it was really funny seeing how people started to interact with it when it was in the space, how we didn't predict it. So that was actually really fun. Less the lighters, but one of the key things about it was about bringing digital and social into the gallery space. And on the Saturday, we, together with the learning teams and Tate Collective, we curated a whole event where the Hello Cube was like a centerpiece to it. And because it had an audio reactive element to it, so that the images would change and the way that the images were affected by audio, we managed to persuade a guy called Actress, who's got quite a cult following. He's a DJ, like a dub. He's kind of come from a dubstep background, but he does more ambient sort of dub stuff now, to like create a soundscape in response to Yaya Kusama. The acoustics are terrible in the turbine hall, so Tate Collective came up with the idea of doing it as a silent disco, and then we plugged the audio into the Hello Cube. So the event itself was called Infinite Kusama. There was lots of things within the event that were curated around it to try and get more young people down to the space and more young people interacting. I should also say that within that space on the bridge in the turbine hall, we had Max set up with the Twitter account, so if people didn't have a Twitter account, they could go join Twitter, interact. They also had one with the Recreative website and all the videos that they'd made around it, and then one actually with the Tate Collective site to make people more aware that we have various kind of website properties that we do for young people. That's pretty rare. We never actually tell people in the gallery that we have lots of digital things available to them. Don't know why. It's a discussion we have a lot. It's very rare that we shout about that. So this was a great opportunity to do that. That was really interesting. We had a Kusama nail clinic nail bar parlour thing, which was really fun. We had a sound application based workshop where there was loads of soundscape based workshops. That's the turbine hall, that's how many people there were. It was really buzzy, it was really amazing. I think we had over 6,000 young people come down. One of the reasons we had as many people, I think, was because Louis Vuitton were involved, and they got us a lot of press, and the right kind of cool press, that the event was happening and the installation was in place. We were in Dazed and Confused, we were in Creative Review, a lot of places where we were on loads of blogs fashion blogs predominantly, because they were the kind of press that Louis Vuitton could get. Actually, that appeals to our audience quite a lot. A lot of young people are really interested in fashion, so that worked really well for us, I think. They got some girl on Twitter called Bipling to come down. She's got thousands and thousands of followers. She have a look at her on Twitter, she's quite funny. She's a bit of a fashionista, like young Cena, and she just tweets random nonsensical nonsense, but she got us a lot of followers. So Louis Vuitton were very useful in the sense that they know how to market things in a way that perhaps Tate actually doesn't so well. Like, it doesn't know how to reach certain younger audiences that have a specific interest in fashion or music or particular scenes. We know how to connect with an arts-based young audience, I think. But I don't think we're like more scene-specific thing. I don't think we're necessarily as connected to. It's another video which actually talks about the event. It's a shame I can't show you the videos, but if I linked them afterwards, you can go and have a look if you want, because it's really tells the story of the project better than I can. So some stats. Okay, the Hello Cube was installed in the Turbine Hall for only 3 days, although I was planning to be a crazy cube on Twitter for at least 6 weeks. Good times. In those 3 days, the Infinite Kasama event hashtag had 2,224 tweets. At Hello Cube in those 3 days had 2,166 tweets. So it was pretty good. From Crowd Booster, we had a reach of about 600,000 on Twitter. Challenges. Main challenge was the stakeholders buy-in and managing expectations. Nothing new here, but large commercial stakeholder projects take a lot of time. They're flipping hard work and require clear communication. Big brands like Louis Vuitton understand the power of social media, but they don't necessarily think about engagement in the same way as museums and galleries. It helps to try and understand the stakeholders' sponsors' language and think how to communicate in a way that they will appreciate and understand. I think I learned that I needed to get their buy-in on a lot of levels throughout the project, and to talk in a way with them that would immediately get them to kind of buy into how it would appeal to their audiences made my life a lot easier. I had a really funny moment when I was sat in the Louis Vuitton store, like, apartment upstairs with like 8 really intimidating Parisian women in leather, trying to explain open source and Twitter interaction to them, and they really didn't care. They were really like, great, but like, how is it going to reach thousands and thousands of people? And I think I just realised at that point that they didn't really have to understand it. They just had to kind of buy into some of the sort of visual elements of it and the excitement around it, which was a good moment, but it was also quite funny. Lessons learned. Ask yourself what makes the process interesting to you. This project for me was something I really wanted to do social media for young people because I knew we should be doing it. But I wanted to do it in a way that was interesting both for me but also for the audience. I wanted the young people to be involved. I wanted Tate Collective to start to tell the institution a little bit about how we should be using social media. And this project was so successful from an internal perspective that now I think we're willing to do more experimental things with digital in the space, with social media in the space, and both like being a cube on Twitter seemed to get a lot of appreciation internally. Question 1, how you use social media. Yeah, we have lots of social media accounts and we do great things on social media at Tate. But I guess for me, I was really worried about having a Facebook page, having all of these things and not knowing why I was doing it. And this was a key way of kind of testing why we were doing it. Work with new people, push the brief with new parameters used outside the museum and a gallery. I'm a strong believer in working with people that don't necessarily work with museums and galleries, because I think that gets people to think differently. We do things in a certain way and we get certain digital agencies who've done stuff with museums and galleries a lot, but I think for my audience, they're ahead of the curve when it comes to technology and they use things in a particular way and they're very trend orientated. So you do need to kind of acknowledge that in an interesting way, and often younger, new, interesting creatives that they're interested in get them directly involved or interested very immediately. Hello Coroners are really popular with young people, and particularly young digital graphics created because Pete, is quite well known for his graphic work, and also Joel lectures at the RCA at Central St Martin's. So they're kind of known by their audience for the creative work that they do, so that was quite important. That's stuff that I've mentioned before. Yeah, and I guess these are just bigger ones. I think the key ones that come out of this is to set qualitative and quantitative measures of success from the beginning with the sponsor. One thing I learned about this was that, as we were saying before, I set the bar for the kind of reach that we would get quite low, and I had to argue that with the sponsor a lot, because I said it was about the fact that the interaction was interesting and that they were actually tweeting an instruction, a command to an installation. That's quite a lot to ask of someone, for them to get their heads around that. So I had to explain that again and again and again. They originally went in saying you're going to, reach hundreds of thousands of people through Twitter. Everyone's going to be interacting all over the world. I was like, it's only there for 3 days. Come on. And that was an issue as well, that we could only get it in there for 3 days with the Louis Vuitton. They threw the handbags out the window for a little while about that, but we managed to calm them down. There was loads of meetings. If you ever have a big sponsor, try and say, I will do 5 meetings as part of the project management schedule. Any other meetings in addition to that, we would need to think about. Like, if you can try and think about that before those meetings suddenly start to erupt, that might help you. Funding, I've touched on this stuff as well. Even though I got funded, this project cost £20,000. Okay, so it was pretty tiny budget. I had to lag a 75k projector, which I nearly broke on Sunday morning, which was one of the most stressful things. Were really funny in the end. I had to literally get so many technicians to work with me. There was UV lighting in the turbine hall from an external company. They didn't install it properly, all sorts of usual kind of installation issues. I had to literally bombard IT and IS with cakes because they had to work over the weekend, and they don't work over the weekend, never. And the guys from SPE, cable trunking. Yeah, that was the main issue. They got me some cable trunking from the building site behind the building where they were building the tanks. I had to beg someone from SPE to get me some nice, lovely looking cable trunking. So there's all sorts of funny issues, but it's all good. If you want to find out more about the Hello Cube, there's articles in Creative Review and Creators Project about the work. There's a big article about Hello and Lewis's approach to open source on their website, which they did for Creative Review, and there was a big 4-page spread on them in Computer Arts. So their practice is quite interesting. And if you've got any more questions about it, you can email me. I actually now work 2 days a week for Hello and Lewis, so I know their process quite well. That's part of a professional development program at Tate. They support me. I'm doing a master's in interaction, and I'm doing part of my work with them in my master's. That's part of it as well. So if anyone has any questions. I've overrun a bit, I'm afraid, sorry.
So what's physically in your cube?
It's literally a computer, but it's mirrored within, and it's angled mirrors. And then there's a camera in the corner that takes shots. So the screen is on the bottom, and the screen is reflected. And then there's 4 different scenes that we had, and those scenes permeate according to the commands. So they change according to the commands, and the reflection changes. And then the camera takes pictures when someone tweets, and that gets saved through the open framework software that we built. And then it automatically tweets, sends a tweet back. So what the camera sees is the same as what you see on the projection. So the projection on the side of the turbine hall was what was seen in the camera. Does that make sense?
That was done in Open Frameworks?
Yeah.
I have a question about the development workshop with young people. Is that something that you guys have done before? Is it something you're planning on doing again? Where did the young people come from?
Yeah, the young people, we recruit the young people. Tate Collective has lots of different recruitment streams. We go to local schools, we go to local colleges, we go to local kind of networks, like youth networks. And then also Louis Vuitton Young Arts Project has a network through lots of local galleries across London as well. So there was lots of kind of young people that we reached out to get them involved in that workshop. And then the development process, that was one of the reasons we went with Helicar and Lewis, actually, because I was really keen, because they do workshops and paper prototyping as part of their process. I was like, that means that young people can get involved, and they spent a lot of time. It's a shame that you didn't get to see that, but they spent a lot of time explaining the software and open frameworks to the young people and how it worked. And I think that was a really important part of it, that young people got an understanding, and the way that they communicated as well, it made it feel like it was something that they really were impacting on, I think, as well. They really open up the process of development to younger audiences, I think, which was really key in choosing them. And we'd love to do it again. We're talking about doing it in the development of the new space at Tate Modern. There'll be actually like a dedicated space, and we're talking about doing more kind of development work with, like, digital development work with young people. Whether that actually happens or not, we shall wait and see. I think it's something that we internally would love to do more of. So yeah, if you want to know more about that, we're actually at Ravensbourne, which is a really good digital course. We've got Tate Collective talking as a group about some of the work that they've done and talking about this project to other students this weekend whilst I'm away. So Tate's really trying to work in that area. I don't think digital development necessarily is an area that we know a great deal about, so that's why I'm always keen to work with new people and for Tate to be open to that. It's funny, I think it's easier with younger audiences sometimes, because you've got the audience's argument that we should be thinking in that space. So I've found that the institution's more open to it because young people are more adventurous with technology and they do think in that space. So yeah.
What happened to the LQ after the project and what kind of documentation took place for like archiving and research?
Well, the Cube the software, if you tweet the Hello Cube, it will send you a little Twitter tweet back saying I'll be alive soon. So it's like it's switched off. We've actually had a lot of inquiries from other institutions that are interested in taking it. I think it would probably go through another iteration because it's so specifically related to the Kusama work. I think if it was to come to life again, it may be another Hello something else. I think that's maybe how they see it.
Hello Toaster.
Yeah, Hello Toaster. Who knows? I think it's the concept behind it, the idea behind it could be brought to life in a different way. I think if you could plug more social media platforms into that kind of responsive idea, then that's interesting. Like Instagram obviously is huge amongst that audience. It's actually probably more of a natural choice than TwitPic images. So if you could engineer something that involved Instagram, then that could be really interesting. Yeah.